What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name's Kyle. Tonight, June 24th, we're going to be continuing our 2024 fantasy projection series team by team. I've already covered the AFC East and the AFC North. Halfway, or I guess we're finishing up here with the NFC or the AFC North. So we'll move on to the NFC North next. But either way, we've already got a bunch of the videos up. I'll probably post a comment directing you to the playlist if you guys want to check out some of the other teams. But this one's all about the 2024 Pittsburgh Steelers. And we have some interesting new additions to this team. But traditionally what I do here is I'll talk about I guess we'll do a 2023 review, and then we'll talk about the QBs, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. And these numbers are just my preliminary projections. What I'm going to be doing is, I have my baseline projections ready to go. Once we start getting into training camp, late July and August, I'll be making my tweaks and whatnot. But you guys can check out all my work at thefantasyfellowship.com. We're doing a membership program this year, $10 a month. You guys get access to a ton of stuff, including my projections, my rankings, my dynasty content. There's a Discord link in there for you guys. A ton of stuff on here right now. And we're only going to keep adding to it as the season goes on. So check out thefantasyfellowship.com. Without further ado, let's get into the 2023 review of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was interesting last year because we saw three QBs play a decent amount. Kenny Pickett played the most. Mason Rudolph got about 3 or 4 games at the end of the year. And then Mitchell Trubisky played sparingly throughout. Mason Rudolph was their best quarterback. He actually played really, really well in those few games down the stretch and into the playoffs. He completed 74% of his passes with 74 attempts, 719 yards, 9.72 yards per attempt, and a 3-touchdown, 0 interception ratio. Like he played really, really well, honestly. So he's elsewhere now. So we'll get to see the new look Steelers with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But 2023, we saw Matt Canada try again and fail again. It's a product of what they were using at quarterback, but it is also, function of the offense that was play designed. But last year they threw less attempts last year, 506 attempts down from 571 in 2022. Passing yards were down, yards per attempt were down, touchdowns were very spare in both years. And they ran the ball about the same. So almost, 500-ish rushing attempts and about 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, just absolutely nothing out of the passing game. So this year we're going to expect a little bit of a boost there. They regressed offensively last year in terms of plays, down almost 100, about 80 plays from 2022 and down almost 300 yards from 2022. So they took a step back last year despite winning one more game. And that's what's scary about this team. They win 9-10 games and their offense is very suspect. And now they're adding Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, adding some juice at quarterback. We'll see if this team can get back on track and maybe, make a run at the AFC North. So 2023 review, I'll say we know their defense is good. Offense kind of bottomed out last year. I think they're going upwards this year in pretty much all categories. And I'm excited to see what happens with Arthur Smith at the offensive coordinator position. So 2024, let's look at the quarterbacks. And I did let me pull it up. I did a Twitter poll the other day. Let me grab that here for you. I did a poll asking how many games Russell Wilson would start this year. And 41% of the vote said 13-plus games. And I'm kind of in the same mentality right now. I do have Russell Wilson projected for 455 passing attempts. Justin Fields about 90. So maybe 3.5 games for Justin Fields, which puts you right at that 13, 14 games for Russell Wilson. So I have Wilson at 67% completion percentage, about 3,300 yards, 7.31 yards per attempt, 20 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, 50 rushing attempts, 245 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble. And I think people are kind of we're kind of done with Russell Wilson, but somehow he ended up being QB 13 last year in a 4-point passing touchdown lead. Like he didn't throw for a lot of yards, but 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And, I could argue the offense is better here in Pittsburgh than it was in Denver last year. So he also ran for a lot of rushing yards and some touchdowns too. So I kind of like Russell Wilson. He's one of my most drafted guys in the later rounds. You can get him around 18, 19, 20 in best ball drafts right now. And I like him as my QB 2 or 3 because I have a feeling he's going to be at that 13, 14 game mark. And on a website like Drafters, he's going to accumulate you a decent enough fantasy points and maybe be a top 15, 16 QB by the end of the season. And by all accounts right now, it sounds like Justin Fields is struggling in minicamp and OTAs. Like, it's not even a competition right now. It's Russell Wilson's job to lose. And, this Steelers team won 10 games last year with Pickett, Rudolph, and Trubisky. I think Russell Wilson's going to be able to get this team to the playoffs. And, if they're, 9-4, 9-5 heading into the final stretch of the season, I think he's going to stay out there. So he would have to really bomb for them to go to Justin Fields. Even though they want to see Justin Fields, they do get to see him in practice every day and see his work ethic and see how he is with his teammates. So we'll watch for that. But I fully expect Russell Wilson to start 75 to 80% of the games at minimum, barring injury. But if Fields does get in there, I have him projected, again, for about 3 games. His stats are there. It's fine. I'm not really excited to see Justin Fields. I think for fantasy, we want to see Russell Wilson in there because George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and the running backs, I think, would benefit from Russell Wilson. So I'm drafting Russell Wilson. I think he's a nice low-end QB2 for Superflex leagues. And this Arthur Smith team, man, people forget. I mean, he was working with absolute junk quarterbacks in Atlanta. But before that, he turned Ryan Tannehill into one of the most efficient quarterbacks. And they had I think they had a top 5 offense back in 2020, and maybe 2019, they were like 10th, 11th. So I do think Russell Wilson could bounce back in some efficiency metrics this year. He's not going to light up the scoreboard or anything, but I think he can be a solid, actual real-life quarterback. We'll look into the running backs next. And last year, we did start to see Jaylen Warren get more and more involved on this team. He did have 74 targets, 61 receptions. Najee had 38 targets to 29 receptions. So Jaylen Warren he's the passing down back. And last year, we saw Arthur Smith really frustrate owners with Bijan and Tyler Algier. But Bijan had a ton of targets, and so did Algier. These guys got the ball a ton. And I think there's room for both guys to eat, and there's room for both guys to be good picks. We know the running game is Arthur Smith's bread and butter. Everything runs off of it. So I like both Najee and Jaylen Warren this year. I do expect a little bit more of a closer split this year than last year. I think Jaylen Warren's the better player. All the advanced metrics agree. But I still have Najee leading this team in carries with 235, 975 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 23 receptions, 140 yards. So useful in a half PPR format. That's where I prefer him. But Jaylen Warren is my dude. He is my most drafted player in best balls right now. 170 rushing attempts, 865 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then I have him continuing to grow as a receiver. 68 receptions, 85 targets, 495 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's going to be the second or third target on this team. He's going to be a weapon. And man, if anything happens to Najee Harris, we're talking about a league winner. So he not only has weekly, 10 to 12 point floors, if he catches, 3-4 passes a game, gets his 8 to 10 carries, he's getting a lot of volume there. And again, if anything happens to Najee, you got something pretty good. So the other running back, Cordero Patterson's there. He's going to be special teams and some, change of pace role. But otherwise, there's really nothing else to worry about at running back. If it comes to injuries, we'll talk about that on the waiver wire. But I have Jaylen Warren in full PPR up here at RB13. Again, he's my favorite player to draft right now. I think he's an absolute steal. And people still aren't really paying attention. Last year, if you filter by full PPR, Jaylen Warren, RB20 last year. And he's being drafted right in that range right now. I think he improves. I think this offense improves. I think he gets more work, and he's got potential to be a top 15, top 16 back. I feel very, very strongly about Jaylen Warren. And then I do have Najee Harris right here at RB24. So I think, again, there's room for 2 guys in this offense. We'll move into the wide receivers next. And this one's an interesting spot because they don't really have a true number 2 receiver. Obviously, George Pickens is there. My money's on Calvin Austin being the second man. Roman Wilson, the rookie, Quez Watkins, Van Jefferson, and honestly, it's a really bad receiving group after George Pickens. But we'll start with Pickens. He actually surprised me when I looked back at his numbers last year. I think Mason Rudolph really helped him finish the year strong, but he ends the year as wide receiver 28. He went for 1,140 yards, 5 TDs, 63 catches. So a pretty solid stat line. He improved in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Everything was a career high for him. And now he's getting probably, I know it's Russell Wilson, but it's probably the best QB play that he's had in his 2 years at Pittsburgh. So I have Pickens going through for career highs, 74 catches, 125 targets, 1,165 yards and 8 touchdowns this year. I think he's the feature guy. I'm hoping that they let him kind of move around and don't just stick him on the outside. Like, he should be Russell Wilson's #1 target and be the focal point of the passing game. So love George Pickens. Grab him when you can. And then all of the drum beats in OTAs and minicamp were that Calvin Austin was the next best receiving playmaker on the field. We saw him in flashes last year. He did have a decent, season, 17 catches, 180 yards and a touchdown. He does get carries, and he can be a weapon, on the ground and jet sweeps and things like that. So I have him, and he was coming off an injury last year. Now that's all behind him. And I think he's ready to kind of, step into a larger role in this offense and kind of be like a Wan'Dale Robinson type for this guy, for this offense, and help move the ball. We know Arthur Smith's going to be able to dial, some gadget plays up for him. So I have him as wide receiver 2, 52 catches, 85 targets, 580 yards and 3 TDs. And some work on the ground there. But after that, Roman Wilson doesn't sound like he's generating much buzz in camp. The coaches are kind of challenging him. I'm not buying Quez Watkins. I'm not buying Van Jefferson. It's really Calvin Austin is the incumbent #2, I think, and we'll see if Roman Wilson can beat him. But I'm not really drafting a lot of Wilson right now until we see more. For now, I've been grabbing a lot of Calvin Austin. So the receivers are spotty. This is a team that could easily grab another receiver here in free agency, or trade for someone. That would be crazy. But we need more work here at the receiver position. So it's really just George Pickens, maybe Calvin Austin, maybe Roman Wilson. I did like Roman Wilson coming out of Michigan too, but we need to see it before we start clicking on him, to say the least. I'll show you guys where I ended up with George Pickens for my wide receiver rankings. Pickens at wide receiver 20. So again, wide receiver 28 last year. I have him growing and being a really good pick right now. Like, he's right in the Jaylen Waddle, DJ Moore, Devontae Adams, Devonta Smith kind of tier for me, in projections wise, not rankings wise. But there's going to be points for George Pickens. And then we'll finish up with tight end. Pat Freiermuth has been getting he's been getting good buzz in OTAs and minicamp. He's going to be the #2 target for this team. I think Russell Wilson's going to like him a lot. And he was injured last year on and off, and it was just kind of a stinky year for the offense. But Pat Freiermuth's a good tight end, and I think we're going to see him featured this year. 63 catches, 90 targets, just under 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. And honestly, I feel like I'm being low here. Like, I'm not really projecting a ton of volume for the passing game weapons, but I like Pat Freiermuth a lot. I think he can be a fringe tight end 1. He's being drafted in the 12-13 round range right now. So if you wait for tight end, I like Pat Freiermuth a lot. Maybe we see a little bit more work out of the second-year Darnell Washington, the athletic freak out of Georgia. I have him getting some work because it's Arthur Smith, and he's going to dabble with some weird stuff in the red zone. And then Connor Hayward's still there as well. But I do like Pat Freiermuth considerably, and he should be one of your, if you miss out on some of the top guys, you should be looking for Freiermuth. I have him at tight end 13 right now. But hey, that's it. That is the 2024 Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll kind of just do a recap here. I'm drafting Russell Wilson as a quarterback 2 or 3 on my best ball teams. I do think he can be I'm assuming he's going to win the job and play a long time. I think he can be your super flex starter if you want to wait for QB2, and he's going to be a guy that scores a lot of fantasy points as long as he's starting. So I like Russell Wilson at running back. Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris are kind of going in the same round right now on best ball. I prefer Jaylen Warren in full PPR. You can maybe convince me Najee's the better player in half PPR, but I'm very strongly feeling that Jaylen Warren is the better real-life football player. So I'll continue to draft Jaylen Warren when I can. I'm drafting the hell out of George Pickens, a little bit of Calvin Austin at the end of my drafts, and then Pat Freiermuth should be a tight end target for you. So I'm painting an optimistic picture for the Steelers here. I really like this whole division. AFC North is going to be really, really tough, and it's just going to be a survival of the fittest. Who can stay, the healthiest, the longest, and just stay consistent. So we'll see what happens here, but I'm liking what I think the Steelers are a sleeper team this year. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. That's how the channel grows. Check out some of the other teams that I've been doing projection videos on, and join us on Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Central Time. That's when we're starting up the ESPN redraft mock draft. So if you guys want to join us, 7 p.m. Central Time. But hey, that's it for me, guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next time. Peace.